Greetings and welcome to Killer Leads. What I want to cover from the very start is the subject of the basics of subtractive synthesis. Some people call it analog synthesis, but it's actually called subtractive synthesis. I want to make sure that this is covered because a lot of what comes later depends upon you knowing the basics of synthesis. So if this is cool, then you can build upon that and get on with the rest of the stuff. So subtractive synthesis, what is it then? Okay, in its most basic form, it's you have a sound produced by an oscillator that you put through a filter to take away bits of it that you don't want, and then you put it into an envelope, an amplifier envelope, which shapes the amplitude of the sound over time. That's a basic, very basic analog synthesizer. For example, a TB303 is exactly that. Has one oscillator, goes into a filter, and then it goes into an amplitude envelope with a filter envelope along the way. So in fact, subtractive synthesis is a lot more like sculpting in art than it is building something or constructing something, because you start with something which is a whole and complete thing, like a block of marble or a oscillator in the case of a synthesizer, and you take away bits of it until you're left with the bit that you need. So that's why it's called subtractive synthesis, because you take stuff away. The basic pattern for the kind of archetypal synthesizer was set by the Minimoog, which was basically two oscillators, there's actually three, a couple of LFOs, and a bunch of different waveforms: sine, square, saw, triangle, and a couple of envelopes. That pattern is pretty much your archetypal analog synthesizer pattern. For example, the Nord lead is pretty much that, and the virus is pretty much that. Although with recent software updates, they've got a lot of more bells and whistles added to them, but that's the basic pattern of them. So your kind of archetypal analog synthesizer, as I see it anyway, has two oscillators, a couple of LFOs, a couple of envelopes, and various ways of various modulation destinations. The basic modules in an analog synth, as I mentioned before, first of all you've got an oscillator section, and most synthesizers have 3 or 4 types of basic waveforms. First, saw wave, which is the richest harmonically, has more overtones than anything else. Second, square wave or pulse wave, depending upon whether the up part of the waveform is the same as the down part of the waveform, makes it the square wave, and if it's any other ratio, then it's a pulse wave, which is also this very rich harmonically, slightly less so than a saw wave, and interestingly only has odd harmonics as opposed to a saw wave which has even harmonics, so they kind of sound different. Third type of waveform is a triangle, which is much less harmonics than the saw or the square, and followed lastly by a sine wave, which has absolutely no harmonics whatsoever. It just has the fundamental tone, the fundamental being the basic vibration of the oscillator, or the basic vibe of the oscillator, the frequency of it. No overtones, no harmonics, nothing, just the fundamental. It's important that you know that, because I've seen people saying, you know, the sine on this thing hasn't got, you know, put it through the filter and nothing happens. Well, of course not, because it's got no harmonics. So that's the basic anatomy of a subtractive synth. Start off with something, put it through a filter, take bits away, put it through an amplitude envelope, which you can then take more stuff away. You can shape the sound over time.